Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome back to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here. I have Mr. Gregory Birch in the house. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, Austin. Thank you so much for having me on, man. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Man, it's great. Great to catch up with you right beforehand. But I think the most important thing to get this kicked off here is kind of telling the audience your story and where you want to start it, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I am I'm a previous Army veteran. I served in the military for 11 years. I was an ROTC graduate. So went to college out of high school, got an ROTC scholarship. And then when I graduated, the deal for them paying my school was, I was like, yep, I'm going to go serve and be with Uncle Sam. And I did that for 11 years. And then when I got out, I got into insurance and became an insurance broker. When I was in the military, when I was in college, before I graduated and got military, I got married and had my first child. And, that's a hard thing to do when you're a kid, I guess. And I've got 4 kids. We had 4 kids together, and the military is very difficult on marriages. We ended up getting a divorce towards the end of my time in the military. Got a divorce, separated, and then I had a lot of PTSD from some of the experiences, and really from the divorce because of how it happened, and that I carried with me for a long time. And I got out. I wanted to make a name for myself, so I was like, I had a great time in the military, learned a lot, got some fantastic training. It's very unique, and decided I'm going to take my shot at being an entrepreneur and sales, because I tested really high in sales and leadership when I was coming out with a bunch of headhunter companies that help junior military officers to connect them with Fortune 500 companies, because the skills are transferable, but the way that the military, I guess, discusses or talks about, what their skills are and how they are with the evals and stuff like that. It doesn't really translate very well to Fortune 500 companies in the civilian world. So they have these headhunter companies that help to basically translate all of your awards, your evals as a military officer, and translate it so that they can understand it. And they do testing and stuff like that to see, hey, this is your strength. This is where you should try to land. And I always tested very high in sales and leadership. So that's kind of fell into a sales leadership role, got into insurance. And, being an entrepreneur sucks, man, at times when you first start. It's real hard. It's I don't know what all I can say here, but it's a straight kick in the nuts every morning when you wake up.
It's an interesting dichotomy between chasing ultimate freedom, but having none in the beginning.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody this morning, like, I just have a lot going on right now. Plus we're leaving for Costa Rica tomorrow. And so like Saturday I worked for like 6 hours, and everybody's like, oh my God, but like you worked, like you're the guy that says you don't work on the weekends. And I was like, yeah, I know, I get it, but it's entrepreneurship. And I just had to get this stuff out of my brain and get it off my list. And that was the only day available. Right.
Absolutely.
But also let's not lie that it felt pretty damn good when I got it all done. So it's like, that kind of, it's just like this reward / as you said, kick in the nuts, all in the same sentence.
Which you get used to. Like I remember when I first started, I would wake up with my butthole puckered every morning, just like, how am I going to make money today? Because it's eat what you kill.
Well,
and
I actually think what's interesting, and this is for another project on another day, but I want to write a book or start a podcast solely based on being in a relationship with an entrepreneur. Like how great are the men and women that are married to these entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Because it's, hey, we have no money. Hey, we have tons of money. Hey, I'm fucking gonna go do an Uber. I'm gonna go be an Uber driver. Like, oh my God, I'm the fucking smartest person in the planet. Yeah.
Like all the extra stuff you got to do just to grind it out. It's like, oh man, like we're gonna be free. I own my own business, and then it's like, man, I'm working 80 hours a week just we're eating ramen noodles, but and I when I first started insurance, man, I was depressed. It was this roller coaster of like high highs and low lows, and the highs got higher and the lows got lower. And it got to a point where I'm gonna keep it real, bro. I'm a pretty transparent person. I had an episode with the next girlfriend time where I was going to kill myself. I was going to commit suicide, and I was super highly depressed, man. I was just in a really dark place. I mean, she didn't help at all, the situation at all either. But, that I had this breakthrough moment where because she called the cops. I had a gun, and I was like, I was just ready to end it. And cops come, and they like surrounded my house. There was like so many people. It was like 30 cop cars on my street, and they're with bullhorns. They're like, come out with their hands up. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. Like I've never been in trouble with the law ever. And I called a friend, and they were like, hey, did you do anything yet? And I was like, no. And they're like, hey, there's nothing wrong. Just put the weapon down, unload it, like go out there and go talk to him. So I went out there and I talked to him, and man, I was just like in tears, and I was like breaking down. And this cop was just super kind to me. And he was like, hey man, he was like, you're a veteran? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, dude, like, do you go see the VA? Do you go get help? And I was like, no. And he was like, you need to. He was like, you're holding on to some shit, man. Like you need to talk this out. And so it took me to an inpatient facility, and I never actually got checked in. I just sat there for like 24 hours in this waiting room, until they finally like released me. My sister drove in to the town, because I live outside Dallas, and I'm from Clarksville, where my family's from. So she drove over. My older sister came and she got me, and I just got into the counseling, and I got into treatment, and it started changing my life. And it helped me, allowed me the opportunity to focus on what was important, and not ride those high highs and those low lows, and just stay even keel. And then when I did that, I started to find more success, and I started to be more consistent in the business, and not get too excited. Because this is what happens with entrepreneurs. This is why you have those times when you're like, hey, we got money. It's like, oh, we're broke. It's because you have that success, and you allow that success to get to your head. And then you're like, it's almost like you take off the gas. Mm-hmm. And then when you take off the gas enough, what happens is that the money goes away. And then you're like, shit, I got to go back and you got to put the foot on the gas again, and you got to, accelerate again. And it's this constant, like, it's like being in a traffic jam. We're like, woo, stop, and it's constant, and it's really terrible way to live. You have to stay constant. You have to stay steady. And so I stopped getting excited about massive sales. I stopped getting excited when I had money in my bank account. I always operated like, I haven't made it yet. I haven't made it yet. I haven't made it yet. And it just made me more consistent. And so I got introduced through the business from somebody I met. Got introduced to Andy Frisella, who I knew nothing about. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about the Real AF podcast, and started listening to it. And they were like, hey, let's do this 75 hard. I was like, what the hell is this thing? So I listened to it, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Why not? Like, okay. Like, I like working out. I was, big in shape, and I don't mind getting on a diet. That doesn't bother me. And I don't mind not drinking. I've been deployed twice, and I went a whole year without drinking. So what? So, I did it. And the first time I did it, I failed. I got like day 24 or something, and I fell out. And when I sat there and looked at it, I was like, this is in September 2020 is when I started it the first time. Failed out like in October. And I was like, I get it. Like, I get the point of this program. Yeah, I understand it. Like, no big deal. I didn't get it. Not at all. And so that the person that introduced me was actually, at the time, she was my girlfriend. A different girlfriend. I mean, obviously I have a bad woman picker. So her and I break up, and we had a bad breakup, And I was really I was a little depressed. I was a little down, but I was like focused on work, I was focused on work. And in 2021, the beginning of the year, I was listening. It was like February. Basically, it was a year ago, almost to the day of today. It was like right after Valentine's Day. I was listening to the podcast where Andy talks to Omar, and Omar's like talking about his experience studying up hard. And there was something he said in it that he's talking about the changes in his life and his business and everything. And he was like, at the end of 75 days, I was a different human being. And like, if you have to go through the whole program, if you think that you've understood it, you don't. And I was like, he's talking to me. So I literally, the next day I started 75 hard, and I was like, I'm going to complete it this time. It's happening. And so I did. And it completely changed my business. It completely changed my life. Being on that disciplined schedule, like, took away a lot of my PTSD, my depression, my anxiety. I was seeing a therapist every couple of weeks, like every 2 weeks. I was on medication. I'm no longer on medication. I don't have to seek therapy as much anymore. Like, I haven't been in a therapy session for like 3 months. Because it was because my life was there was so much turmoil. There was so much like up in the air that was causing all this little bit of anxiety to just get to a point where it would be like your cup overflows and then you just crash. And so then I made a lot of changes. I ended up making some big waves in my industry. I'm in insurance still. Made some big waves and started a podcast and got connected with another company where I became partner of, and still own my own agency, my own separate company. And so, yeah, man, that's a little bit about me, where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I love it. And so much there. I think something that I really harping on lately is just the utter complexity that most people put in their life. And I know it is a tactic of self-sabotage on purpose, because the thing that I am high on right now is that it's actually harder to win and continually to win than it is to just live in your toxicity and mediocrity. Mm. And I think people are actually scared of their own greatness. And so they inherently put complexity in their way, because, my favorite question that everybody asks me is like, what program should I do to like lose weight? And I'm like, it's called shoes and a socks and 2 feet. Just start fucking walking. Like, but it's got to be this thing. It's got to be this new workout gear, this new workout facility, and all this shit. And I just don't care. Rain, sun, like, and there's such a beauty to life when you can find joy in, not letting the external forces dictate how you operate. It really is like, okay, it's cold today. Okay, great. I'm going to bundle up. Let's go to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I agree. 1,000%. It's, I think people are afraid of their own greatness, and like, they're more afraid, and not so much of they'll fail, but they're afraid of like what they'll do when they succeed. Like, what's the next step? And then also everyone's looking for a cheat code. I think that's it. It's like, well, what should I do? Like, they're looking for someone to come in and give them this magical solution where they're just like, it's like the clouds will part and the heavens will come up alive and the light will shine down. They'll be like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. It's just action, just take action. And so I see this all the time in entrepreneurs. They're like, well, especially with agents that I coach and I mentor, they're like, well, what leads should I buy? What product do I use? What do I do that? What's training? Which training to do? Do all of it. Just decide and commit. Just commit to something. It's not hard, and usually I'll just ask them like, well, which one do you want to do? Well, I kind of want to do this. Start there.
Dude, I came up with it. Every answer that you seek is on the opposite side of action.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I have clients who are overthinkers, and they'll give me, a 7-page dissertation about this property. And I'm just like, go buy it. I know, but what about, nope, that's not what I said. Go buy it. Well, I know, but what? Nope, go buy it. No. And so I just read this book called Blitzscaling, Reid Hoffman and this other guy who talks about like an Uber or a Facebook or whatever. And they're basically saying, like, in order to get ahead in the technology age where we are, is to take massive, almost reckless action to beat out your competition, to position yourself in a place where you can then take an assessment of what's working and what's not working, and then regroup and then do it again. And like, I realized that like, when I started a podcast, it wasn't like how many episodes I'm going to do. I'm going to record 9 a day for 11 months straight, almost like 3 days a week. And I just did like 190 episodes, and I learned more about myself and my guests and everything. And then, okay, now let's talk about who's my actual audience. Are we doing the right marketing for this? On and on. And so, boom, the coaching business. I'm just gonna be everywhere, talk to everybody. Wait. After a year, who's my ideal client? What time do I really want to be doing? And so I realized that I'm subconsciously or unconsciously doing that on purpose, and it served me really well.
And you're absolutely right. It does. I did the same thing when I started my podcast. You ever seen the movie Yes Man? With Jim Carrey?
I think once, long time ago.
I love that movie. And so I was literally watching that movie my first completion of 75 Hard, when I was actually like in my mindset. I watched Yes Man. And I had this epiphany. I was like, it's because of the positivity that comes from taking on challenges and just committing to things. And like, that's kind of like the underlying theme and the understanding of the movie. Like, because he said yes to all these things, like it's like his life kind of comes into alignment, and they all kind of blend together for him to become this better person. And I looked at that and I was like, dude, I'm going to start doing that. So I just started saying yes to everything. And one day someone was like, why don't you start a podcast? I had no idea how to start a podcast. I didn't know how to like record. Like, if you look at my first podcast, I was terrible. I didn't know how to talk on it. I didn't have a microphone. I didn't have a good camera. I didn't have, my setup was terrible. And I was usually like using my iPhone, put on a prop, and I was just like transferring everything over. And like, I had multiple cuts and edits because I kept messing up. I didn't know what to say, but I just did it. And over time, I got better and I got better and I got better. And then I started bringing people on, I started interviewing people, and I did the same thing as you. I was just like, I'm just going to do it. Yeah. And I just committed to it without actually thinking through everything. And I just started doing it. And what happens is that it's almost like, how like Ed talks about your RAS. Now that I'm doing it, my RAS is tuned to, this is something that's important to me. So now I'm picking up things all around the world, because it's just, that's important to me now. So I'm like, wow, I actually can use this on the podcast, or, oh, wow, let me go and use this camera, or let me get this new microphone, or, oh, you know what? There's a really good topic to do. And more things are hitting me because I'm just doing it. I just did the action because it's important to me now. And that's a perfect example of that, like you just started doing it. Well, you're like, I'm just gonna do, I don't know how many, I'm doing it.
I don't know how many. But what's interesting is the number one question, I was just talking to my girlfriend about this issue. Number one question I get is like, how do you stay in your routine, and how do you do business on the road? Because you travel so much. Because like, we're living in an RV now. I have meetings in Costa Rica on Wednesday when we'll be there. Like, and then podcast, I didn't take it on the road, as I call it, right? I didn't take it, the routine, the habits that I have, I didn't take it on the road until it was road ready.
Yeah.
I didn't take the podcast gear on the road till I figured out what I needed for the road. But I got really good at doing it here. And that's why the habit base that I have can operate away from that, because I did enough reps in a closed environment. It's like when I got sober, like, I'm going to venture to guess that the second day you were sober was probably not the best day to go to a bar. But now 3 years in, I can make you your drink for you and don't give a shit because I'm still a master bartender. But it didn't happen on day one. But everybody's wanting you and I success in the podcast realm on day one.
Yeah. And you're not going to get it.
When actually reps are the only thing that you need.
Yeah. And the other thing on top of reps is that you got to, don't look at the metrics every day. It's like going to the gym.
I didn't look for a year and year and 7 months on purpose because I knew myself. And then when I looked, it was by accident. So
yeah, you just did. And if you'd have looked like month one, it'd have been like 1 view. And you were like, that was me. that was my view. I actually commented on a post yesterday. I don't know if you know him, who Ryan Stewman, at Hardcore Closer. he talked about when he started his podcast, which was just an internet radio talk show at the time, what they're called. And so he's like, I did it for years and I wasn't getting any views. No one cared. No one gave a shit. Now I've been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years or whatever. And I'm getting, 1.5 million downloads a month. It's because of the consistent action. Like I didn't start there. And that's the same way with me. And I was like, dude, that's awesome because like I'm just now coming up to my 1 year of doing podcasting. And really in August is when my current podcast is the ADV1 podcast. It started in August. So haven't even hit my year yet. And I'm like, wow, that makes me feel a lot better because I don't really look at the metrics. I don't think about it, but every once in a while I'll get an email like, oh, you had 5,000 downloads this week. And I'm like, okay, like, all right. Like, I don't know what that means in terms of scale. Like, I have no idea. I don't know what's good. But then he's like, oh man, I got 1.5 million a month. I'm like, ooh, 5,000 a week. That's terrible.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things there. One is that, and I said this morning to a coaching client, is that your volume that you're putting out or the volume that you're receiving in to you in your world might seem really big until you stack it up against somebody else's and you're like, well, I'm not, I need to do more. I need to be more. But what I think is very interesting, I listened to this podcast this morning and he was talking about like what we're actually seeking. And I can relate this to investing in your first property. You're not seeking the mechanisms of business. That's tried and true. Like it's out there.
Yeah. What
you haven't experienced yet that's freaking you the fuck out is that you haven't had the feeling of it being in the moment that many times. And when you like making money, getting downloads, like when I got my first 1,000, it was like, okay, that's great. Now, now that we're way over this, I'm like, okay, great. But like, how do I expand it to even more people that don't know me? That number's great. And I'm impacting people. And yes, all the above. But then it just becomes something bigger when you kind of been there and done that. And that's why I think, I could shut down everything else I'm doing and spend my entire life studying salespeople, because I think it's I think of every space that's been out there. Mm-hmm. I think that it's changed more in the last 15 years than ever. And I was just talking to my sales mentor yesterday. We had lunch with him in Houston. He taught me everything I knew about sales in the beginning. It used to be a run and gun, push you down your throat. I'm going to get something over on you. And now everybody has the data and everybody knows what that pushy thing is. And it's become more of, I'm not selling you anything. It's an opportunity for you, and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. And so as you look at your businesses and insurance and sales and kind of the area that you're in, do you see that most people are growing within that? Or are they still fighting the old way that it used to be done and not seeing the success?
I love this question. I'm actually trying to change the entire insurance industry right now. And that's my goal, is I want to change it because it's still stuck in that old model of pushing things down people's throats.
Construction, same thing. Yeah. Construction, can't stand it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just doing the same exact thing over and over again. And also it's not just with the sales, but it's also with the recruiting of new salespeople. It's how they do both of those. So when they sell, perfect example of this is, do you know Simon Sinek? I love Simon Sinek, and the golden circle concept is a perfect concept of comparing old sales versus new sales. Old sales, just what, how, why, sometimes the why, not really, like this is what it does. And this is how it's going to help you buy my product, versus, hey, client, why are you looking for this kind of, how can I serve you? This is what I think can benefit your situation. It's a lot different. And it goes the same. It goes from sales, it goes from marketing, it goes for everything. And so like when I sit down with a salesperson, when I was at a previous company, also within the insurance realm, they were just like, hey, we're the best IMO out there, best insurance marketing organization out there. We're the best. We have the best comp. We have the best leads. We're the best. You want to work this because we're the best. And it was just all about me. This is what we do. This is who we are. And I used to try to recruit off of that, and I couldn't. Like, it didn't feel organic. It didn't feel right. And I never really recruited a lot of people. And I started doing it a different way. And I started following the Golden Circle, and I found Simon Sinek. I started reading a lot. I read, which I love, The Infinite Game. I love Start With Why, and it also Leaders Eat Last. But all three great books. But I started to recruit starting with why, and so now I have meaningful conversations with people. I do a lot of content. I send people to the content so they can understand. And then by the time they come to me, they have enough of an understanding of what this is. And then I just ask them, like, hey, what are you looking for? What goals do you have? How can I help? And if it's a fit for us to you, and you're a fit for us and you fit our culture and you fit what we're trying to do here. I don't want to recruit every single salesperson out there. I want to recruit the right salespeople that fit our culture. That way I'm not spinning my wheels or wasting my time just recruiting the world. Anyone that breathes and can get an insurance license, like, yep, come on in. We can help you sell, because 90% of them fall off. Whereas now I'm hand selecting people that fit the culture. I'm giving them some guidance, and I'm understanding who they are, what they're trying to accomplish. And it changed the game. And it's that's a perfect, it's a perfect way to kind of, I guess, answer what you're talking about with your old sales mentor. And I actually, when I did 75 hard the first time, I broke a sales record that still hasn't been broken. And I did $200,000 of life insurance sales in 1 month. And I worked my ass off while I'm also doing 75 hard. And I was also doing podcasting. I was learning podcasting, doing it consistently every single week. And I broke this record. Everyone's like, oh my God, how did you do that? It's impossible. I could never do that. And I was like, honestly, anyone could do it. Like, if you just followed the system. And I told people, I was like, this is what I learned from it, is I changed my sales process. My closing ratio went through the roof. I didn't have to sit with as many people, because anyone I did sit with, I almost always sold. And it's because sales it's an art and a science that you have to marry together. When you talk to somebody, you have to be able to tap into their why. It has to be an emotional process. Sales decision making, in essence, is an emotional process, period. It's controlled by our limbic brain. So our neocortex, our outer brain, controls all of our speech, our ability to handle large amounts of data, facts, figures, all that. And people think, a lot of my salespeople, especially in the insurance industry, they think they come in and they're like, oh, you want an insurance policy? Well, I got this policy that does this, and this. Oh, no, it's going to give you all your money back. This is perfect, right? And then the client's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't feel right. Like, oh, I got to think about it, And they're wondering why. It's because, dude, you're trying to sell with what? They cannot make a decision on what. The neocortex has no ability to make a decision making. It just cannot do it. But the limbic brain can, and that's all with their emotions. That's all with their why. And when you and so that's the art of it, the why. The science is all the data. So if you can marry those two, where you tap into someone's why and you understand it, and then you back it up with the facts and the data, you back it up with the science, and you can marry those two. Now you have a super powerful salesman. You could not even know everything there is to know about insurance or whatever product you're selling.
I'll tell you, dude, perfect. Thanks for setting me up, bro. I appreciate it. Anytime. I got the perfect story ever. So I sold wine for fucking 18 years. My friend, who was a sommelier at the restaurant that I worked at, that was a very high-end restaurant in Austin, taught me everything. This guy ate dirt. He could eat the dirt and tell you where the wine was. Like, this is how much he knew about wine. And so he comes in. We just opened this very fancy steakhouse on the lake. And he said, hey, there's this wine. I promise you that it will be the number one wine in America every year for the next 5 years, starting in the year. We should sell it. Say no more. So I start selling it. I mean, we're talking about, I would yam out like 6 cases on a Tuesday night, like just crush. Like, I mean, I think I was the number one salesman in Texas. Like, I mean, I was fucking destroying it. It was Orange Swift's wine. I was destroying it, right? Prisoner, before Prisoner was Prisoner.
Yeah.
And he stands up, the whole team's there, the owner's there. Like, I get this fucking award, and because I sold so much wine, and he looks over at me, and like, we lived together. So like, we knew each other real well. He's like, hey man, he's like, everybody, if you are dedicated enough and you know everything about a wine and you know how it feels and tastes and where it came from and who the winemaker is, then you can be like Austin and you can sell the most wine in the state of Texas. And I stood up and said, I never fucking tried the wine a day in my life. And he told me to fuck off and walked out of the room.
Hey, man.
I don't need all the details that you're trying to give me. I actually would prefer that you didn't.
Yeah.
Because everything sells with a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to have a million tables that would let me order the whole menu with the wine pairing for them. And they had the best time ever. And I knew that person, what type of money they could spend, like where they like to be at, right? So I would never go over. I would never break the trust. Mm-hmm. But what I would do when I knew they were coming in is I would find something that they couldn't find somewhere else. And then I would find out the story about the winemaker and why that wine was popular. And then I would tell the story with the food. I mean, dude,
works every time. It's all you gotta do. So what I would always do, the way I do my sales process is, have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fucking love that book, bro. That's probably my favorite book of all time. It changed my sales process completely because all I do is I use empathy. I use tactical empathy by going to the client and I ask all what and how questions. Questions start with what, questions start with how. I never ask a yes or no question unless I want to know and I want them to say no so they feel comfortable. And I never ask a question that starts with why, because why comes off as really accusatory, really. So if someone like didn't have insurance, I would say, instead of saying, hey, why don't you have insurance? I'd say, what's prevented you from getting this before in the past? That's a lot different question. And they can point to something and say, well, I haven't been able to get it because this reason, instead of being like, man, I'm a piece of shit. Like it's a lot different. So then I basically would ask a series of questions that started with what and how to get them to open up. And the more I keep asking questions, the more they'd open up and just start talking and tell their story. And I would take all that and I would tell their story to them in my own words.
Yes.
And I would say, hey, and I would like, this is like, kind of like, I'd be like, hey, what about this? How about this? What about this? And I'm like, hey, thank you for sharing all this, and it sounds to me, well, what I want to do is just, repeat everything back to you, make sure I have it correctly. Is that fine? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, it sounds to me, and I would set my pen down and I would cause I would write down, I'd sit there and write down everything and like, yep. Mm-hmm. And then I'd set my pen down, I'd set my paper and I'd look them straight in the sockets of their soul. And I'd be like, sounds to me like the reason that we're sitting down is because you don't have any insurance in place, and you something happened 6 months ago. Your family member passed away, and they didn't have any place, and that told you like, man, I need to do something because that you had to come out of pocket to help to pay for that funeral, and you thought, man, I can't do that to my kids, so I need to put something in place now so that they don't have to come out of pocket the way that I just did. And so you started looking, you've been looking for 6 months. You've talked to some agents. No one's been able to help you because they either show you something that's way too expensive or they don't actually understand where you're coming from because they haven't taken the time to get to know you. And so you're still looking. Now you want to get something sooner rather than later because you know that you're getting older and health conditions can arise. That's going to make your insurance more expensive. So you want to get something that's going to cover your funeral, nothing more, and be as cheap as possible. That's what's most important to you. Is that all about right? And they're like, yeah, that is right. And it's like instant connection, like, they're like, dude, you see me, you understand me. And it was like that moment of empathy where like, they're like, you completely know where I'm coming from. I could tell them anything. I could tell them the same exact policy that somebody else tried to sell them. And they're like, yes, that makes 100% sense because it came from you. And it's just, I just took the time to understand them.
And this goes across every business sector. Mm-hmm. It's like a real estate agent having a house that's worth $500,000, but the person's approved for $300,000, but yeah, you're still trying to sell them the house. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah. You're wasting your time. You're wasting their time instead of, and that is my biggest issue with the coaching business. And like, like, not every coach is meant for every client.
Yeah.
And like, for me to just like take a big funnel and just go, here, like me or don't like me, I'm just going to tell you what to do. Like, that's not the way it goes.
Well, it's even, you're putting your name on that person. as a
Yes.
coach, because
dude, that is my marketing, walking around in the universe.
Yeah, exactly. So if they don't listen, if you tell them do this and they don't do it and they don't improve, then they'll be like, man, I'm paying Austin Linney all this money to be my coach and I haven't got any improvement. And you're like, hey, motherfucker, you're not listening to anything I'm saying. But it still looks bad marketing because you put your name on that. So that I could see that from that perspective, you have to be very selective to be like, is this person going to follow the guidance that I give? Is this person actually somebody I want to attach to my name? Because it's that marketing, like you said, that's walking around, living, breathing, talking to people. You want them to say, yeah, dude, like this guy's improved my business by X percentage over the past 3, 6, 12 months or whatever, ever since I've been working with him.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, we did a, like, especially in the age that we're in, like everybody's DMing you every 5 freaking minutes. Like, do you want 10,000 followers? Do you want to boost this video? Do you want to think? And like, nobody's allowed to like organically grow anymore. But what I'm totally comfortable with doing is growing organically, touching one person, impacting one person at a time, shaking one hand at a time, knowing that over the long run, right? Because the time horizon, I think this is the big difference between me and a lot of people that I see, especially people that I coach and business consult on. I'm 100% locked into my business is my legacy, meaning that if we build it over 40 years, we build it over 40 years. If we build it over 20 years and sell it, but it's my legacy.
Yeah.
And so you can't compete with me because it's my shit. Like, I just don't care. And so I think that what I've been doing a lot of times with my clients, and I'm sure you have to do this with your sales guys all the time, is I call it recalibrating expectations against the timeline that you've set for yourself.
Okay.
When you take a thing and you say, hey, this is great, but what if you completed this and got it to where it needed to be a year and a half from now instead of 4 months from now? Does it affect your life one way or the other? Well, not really. Does it take a lot of stress off? You better believe it. Okay, great. And let's do that. You mean I can just do that like that? Yeah. Like, you're the keeper of your own key of your own prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. No, it's little things like that I don't even think that we know as a person that we have the ability to just turn it off.
Because we're always comparing to everyone else. Instead of us comparing to our own success. I don't care if I'm getting 1% better or 0.01% better, every week or month, as long as I'm growing and I'm getting better. And I'm, like you said, I would rather impact one life instead of trying to mass send out spam, to everybody and not hit, hit the same way. Have you ever heard of the law of diffusion of innovation?
Mm-mm.
So basically the law of diffusion of innovation is a bell curve of how you bring a product or a service to market. So for the first 10% of that bell curve, those are like the early adopters. Those are the people that you are marketing to, the people that understand your content or your product or whatever, and they're gonna buy it. Like those are the ones that you're kind of slowly getting through. Now, you want to be a purple cow in a field of cows. You want to be exceptional. You want to make sure that those people are tended to. You want to make sure that they love your service, because what happens is that your idea becomes like an idea virus, and they become sneezers, and they sneeze the content for you. They tell other people. It gets past that 10% mark, which that 10% is called crossing the chasm. And when you cross that 10% mark, it goes into the mass market. That's how the mass market starts to hear about you, is not because of your marketing. It's because of the marketing efforts of the people that you truly touch, which is that first 10%. And so obviously with the mass market, it's like 74% of it is mass market, because the last 16%, those are the laggards that are, hey man, these people, just because they just bought a Nokia phone because they can't buy a rotary phone anymore. Like that's not available. So you have this law of diffusion innovation, and that's how marketing goes. And so a lot of people misunderstand how to market themselves. They think, I'm just going to blast this to everybody and I'm going to take whatever sticks. You don't build your business that way. Don't even, especially as a young entrepreneur, if you're starting your own business, you have to focus on, it's going to make your life a lot better too. You're going to be less stressed. Focus on the people that is your niche market, and speak directly to them and talk directly to them and put your service directly to them. They will be so impressed, and focus on them. Also be a fucking subject matter expert in what you do, because they're going to be so impressed with you that they're going to tell everybody about you. You're not even going to have to ask. They're going to be like, dude, Greg's awesome. Dude, Austin's really fucking good with this. Like, you got to talk to him. I highly recommend him. And you'll slowly start to get those people coming in. They're like, hey man, my buddy told me to reach out to you. I want to see if we can set up a time to talk. And you're like, yeah, sure. See if I can help. See if it's a fit, you know?
No, I love that. That's so money. Alex Hermosi, who's basically the only guy I listen to for content. He said if you're struggling in your business, he said, create a framework where you have one client left and do whatever you possibly can to make him happy. And that's what you should do for the rest of your business.
Yeah.
It's like, stop like complicating, like just serve the people that are in front of you. Stop worrying about the people that aren't there.
Exactly. Because if you end up trying to change your product or service to meet the masses, and you don't want to do that because you're going to be too stressed out. There's no product or service that's going to really tailor to everybody. Look at Apple versus Microsoft. Like, look at how they have a niche market. Okay. They have the specific people that they're talking to, and how they talk to them. Those people are diehard Apple fans. Like, I'm a diehard Apple fan. I've got an iMac, a MacBook Pro, an iPad.
I think Android people are for some other planet.
Yeah, they're I hate seeing green text messages. It fucking makes me mad. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, dude, get an iPhone. Like, and I badger them until they do it. So like, I'm doing the marketing for Apple. Like, you see this every day with really big companies, the companies that do it well, like Apple. And you can do this. You can do this in your recruiting. You can do this in your marketing for your sales. You can do this as a leader for people within your team, the way that you lead your team. And so it's just, it makes your life so much easier as an entrepreneur, because you're not trying to please everyone. You're trying to please one group of people. A lot more simple.
So money. So if people want to find out about your podcast and what you have going on, how would they do that?
So you can go to Advantage One Brokers, which is a YouTube channel. You can hit up the Advantage One Brokers Instagram. As the ADV1 podcast, I'm the host. You can also check me out on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Greg Birch 84.
Wonderful.
Birch,
guys, if you got,
RCH.
I love it. And just because I saw it on somebody put it in a comment. You are how tall?
I'm 6'7" and 250.
And your girlfriend is?
She's 5 foot flat. She's 5 foot flat. Yeah.
5 foot flat, 6'7". I love it. No big deal. Yeah.
No big deal.
No, I saw somebody razzing you. I thought it was funny. Yeah. Well, guys, if you got some value from this episode, share it, send it to some friends, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.